Welcome to lecture number 35. Now, when we started this journey, at that point of time, I promised you that even if you have got no knowledge in accounts or finance, when you are going to end up the course, you would be building up an expert knowledge of accounts and finance. Throughout this journey, you have listened to the lectures. You have attempted multiple choice questions. You have done problems of preparation of the profit and loss, balance sheet, ratio analysis, cash flow analysis. You have also solved certain case studies. And I'm pretty sure, now I need not to tell it to you. You yourself can tell that, okay, how confident you are about finance and accounts. Now, in the last lecture of this particular series, Finance for Non-Finance, I shall briefly discuss about working capital management. After this session, you would be able to conceptualize and apply the entire learning into real lives. Now, in these sessions, we talk about the working capital finance or working capital management. Let us explain what do you mean by working capital management. Now, what is mean by working capital? Working capital means capital required for day-to-day working. Day-to-day, why I require money? If I sell in advance and pay in later part or pay in later, in that case, what will happen? Now, in that case, I will not require any working capital. So working capital is required when there is a time gap between incurring expenses and realization of the fund. Now, this time gap appears because of current assets in your balance sheet. So in the case of the working capital, when you try to find out how much working capital, what is working capital, it is nothing but current assets in the balance sheet, because current assets is, except cash and bank, is the amount blocked. Inventory is the amount blocked, receivable amount blocked, other current assets is the amount which is given in advance. So this is the fund is required for day-to-day meeting expenses. So please remember, when you talk about working capital, we are talking about current assets of the balance sheet of a business entity. Now, current assets, as we have discussed, is composition of four parts: inventory, receivable, other current assets, cash and bank. Now, working capital management means how you manage the current assets. When you mean by management of current assets, what does it mean? Management of current assets means that reduce the current assets. In this case, current assets means I am excluding cash and bank. Now, in the case of the working capital management, means you minimize the current assets. Now, always remember, when you talk about working capital, always working capital component should be viewed not as an amount, because it's a balance sheet item. Raw material is a balance sheet item. If raw material is a balance sheet item, you need to be rupees lakhs. But we should never view this in rupees lakhs. It's a product of two numbers. What is the product of two numbers? Months of consumption into months. How many months of consumption is of raw material is blocked in the form of a raw material inventory? You have to calculate. So always remember, the current assets always be viewed as a product of two numbers, cost per month into months. Let me explain. For company A, if the consumption of raw material is rupees 10 lakhs per month and holding level of 2 months, the raw material in the store year-end raw material is 20 lakhs. So this 20 lakhs I should always see from a product of the two numbers. Now for company B of the same industry, if the consumption of raw material is rupees 30 lakhs per month and the holding level is 1 month, the raw material amount is 30 lakhs. So if you look at it, raw material amount is more in company B compared to company A, but company B is better than company A. So what do we say? we say that raw material cannot be viewed in terms of amount lakhs, but it has to be viewed in terms of holding level. Now you can correlate what do you mean by operating cycle. This holding level together is called operating cycle. So when you talk about the minimization, always remember we have to minimize raw material, work in progress, finished goods, receivable amount. Current assets is bad. Why bad? It is a blockage of fund. If it is bad, then why I should have a current assets? I always explain current assets is just like smoking. The smoking is bad but unavoidable. So how you manage smoking? You minimize the smoking. If you can quit, that's fine. So if you can generate sales without current assets, that's also good. Like that is just in time. So always remember current assets is bad and current assets has to be minimized. Now, when I'm trying to minimize the current assets, minimize the number of months. If you minimize the number of months, then what is happening? The cash realization is getting faster. Now, these minimizations can happen by minimization of cost, that is the amount, minimization of holding level, or minimization of both. Now, please remember, if you're working as a consultant and you want to improve the efficiency of a company, first check what is the current assets holding level. So as you know how we can calculate the current assets holding level, we have discussed in the ratio analysis class and also the current ratio analysis class. This is the operating cycle calculations. Take the balance sheet P&L, arrive at the operating cycle and find out whether the operating cycle with respect to the industry is higher or lower. If it is higher, immediately you have to reduce it. Now you have to reduce it means you have to reduce both in amount as well as both into the holding level. The moment what will happen, the people in the shop floor, suppose I'm a production manager, I will always try to keep higher inventory because I always see that higher inventory, my production would be smooth. But if you should, as a finance guy, finance people must tell the operation manager that, okay, if you're keeping the higher inventory, for that additional amount is blocked. If additional amount is blocked, for that additional amount, the company is raising the liability for that additional cost is there. So if you can think it through and if you can make the same operation efficiency with a lower amount of the holding level of inventory, it is better. So like this way, if the operation people is being told that you reduce the holding level to actually achieve the same level of efficiency or same level of production, then it is good. So like this, always remember, as a consultant can immediately, a consultant can immediately improve the performance of a business entity if they reduce the holding level of a company. So current working capital management is nothing but reducing the holding level. This can be done by what? This can be done by the ERP solutions, IT solutions, etc. Steps for working capital management. First, find out the holding level of each component of inventory and receivable. Compare it with the industry. Now, in case the holding level of any component is higher than the industry, we should design strategies to reduce the same. In case of holding level of any company is more than the previous year's level, but the less than the peer level, we should design strategies to reduce the same. So always remember holding level if we can reduce, and always remember if the production people have been told that this is a bad and if you can reduce the holding level then it is good, then it really actually change the organizations. So find out the creditor holding level and it should be brought down. So working capital management is consisting of these 5 steps. So it's a very simple concept. Reduce the holding level by finding it out, the concept that any current assets is bad, except cash and bank I am talking about, is bad, we should minimize it. Now, before we end it up, let me take you through some of the definition of which is used for working capital management. One is the definition called gross working capital. So gross working capital means the total current assets. This is the gross working capital. Next one is called working capital gap. Working capital gap means current assets minus other current liability. This full part is called working capital gap. So what does it mean? Suppose working capital gap of a company as on a particular date is 20 crores. It means that as on that date, the company has to pay to its supplier to run the operations. So working capital gap is the amount to be paid to the supplier. Next is the net working capital. Net working capital, which is also called the margin money for working capital, means how much of the long-term fund is going to the building up of the current assets. So first of all, long-term fund is consisting of non-current liability and equity. Now from that, it will first build up the non-current assets. That's the long-term assets. Extra amount, this part is called margin money for working capital or net working capital. It means that any long-term fund which is going towards building up of the current assets is called net working capital. What does it mean? It means that I have a fund which I have to pay after 1 year, and this is building up my current assets which I'll realize within 1 year. Since I received the fund within 1 year, I have to pay after 1 year. So it improves the liquidity. So if more and more the long-term fund, the more would be the improvmental liquidity of the company. And then whatever gap is remaining, that means from working capital gap, whatever the long-term fund is made, whatever left, that the entity will borrow from bank in the form of a working capital limit. So when an entity is borrowing from working capital limit, it is how it is determine the working capital limit. First, it will calculate what is my optimum current assets, how much I'll get it from market, that is called other current liability. The remaining amount I have to pay to the supplier is called working capital gap. And how much money I will bring it from the long term, that is called the net working capital. And whatever the left, that is the I will go to the bank for getting a limit for 1 year maturity. So when you talk about the working capital management, first reduce current assets. Second, once you reduce the current assets, then how you will be funding the current assets. So once you reduce the current assets, that you can fund it from the market, that is called other current liability. Something you will fund it from long term, that is called the net working capital. More long term fund means there is a more liquidity. And last part is the bank borrowing for working capital, means working capital limit to be paid within 1 year. With this, we end up the finance for non-finance module. But I will give one special session. That session would be around 15-20 minutes, but that will explain important terminologies, maybe related to finance, maybe not related to finance, but using the common jargon. But as far as finance for non-finance concepts, applications are concerned, with this lecture, we finish off. And I'm very sure that all of you which have come up to this stage, and after this there is another quiz is there, I'm pretty sure that all of you have become now, I will say that you are possessing above average knowledge from the market. And some of you have really become experts. Now, if you want to further build up the expertise, you have to continue with the journey to see my video of the YouTube channel, where I will keep on correlating these concepts with the real life scenario. And I promise you that if you continue to walk along with me for another 2 to 3 months, irrespective of your discipline, you would be able to get the most meaning of any kind of financial news, financial applications, and etc. And I personally feel it would be great assets for each one of you. And my special request or suggestions to those people who are starting the first year MBA. I'm very sure that you have gone an terrific advantage compared to others. Because why? Because since you're coming from the non-finance background, non-commerce background, this particular topic is a major obstacle. Since you have spent some time before this year's delayed start, and you have actually invested some time, and you have built up something which you will be able to realize when the course starts. I sincerely thank each one of you to spend this time on this course, and wish you the best of luck of all your endeavors, whether it is your job, whether it is study, or whether it is your business. Thank you very much for attending this entire course.